It's been about a year and a half since we had our shop built. It's a typical pole barn type building, 30 by 48 with 10-foot high walls. We had a 30-foot by 30-foot area sectioned off inside, lined with steel. Concrete floor, we had them set about 2¼ inches lower than the concrete floor for the garage portion. What this would allow us to do is lay pressure treated 2x4s on flat and sheet it with 3/4 inch OSB. When I got the OSB, it wasn't exactly what I ordered. This was tongue and groove. I didn't want the tongues and grooves, but I went with it rather than returning it. I was in a hurry. I started by laying out a perimeter using a laser level, found the high spot. Once I got a perimeter laid out, I got called out of town. Mrs. Wilson finished up. What this allowed us to do also was run conduit and circuitry under the flooring for additional tools that we were going to do. I knew I was going to cluster my tools. I was going to have a table saw set, so I ran individual circuits for all these different outlets. We staggered the flooring, starting out with a full 4x8 sheet in the southeast corner and going east to west. Next sheet was a half sheet. Well, here's that first half sheet. We knew this is where we were going to set the wood stove. Figure all I would have to do is just screw down a scrap of 2x4, take out a few screws, and then pop this out with a pry bar. Wasn't taking into consideration all the floor leveling, the fact that some of the areas got glued down, the deck paint was awful thick. Started marking it out, chiseling along. Soon realized I was going to have to change my strategy. Pulled a few of the screws out, kept trying to pry it with just a chisel. Figure I'll just go back and get some pry bars, pry it up real carefully, make sure not to mess up the adjacent pieces. Once I got a small starter hole, it started prying up, but I'd be real careful not to mess up the tongue and groove mechanism on the adjacent pieces. Just worked at it slowly. Got another scrap 2x4 and just pried up. Used my hammers to hold it in place. Just worked the edges. I was pretty careful not to rip out the adjacent pieces. Didn't want to create any more work than absolutely necessary. Once I had this 4-foot by 4-foot piece taken out, went ahead and took out all the screws, a couple of loose 2x4s I had sitting in there just for support. Then I decided to rip the one 2x4 that was split between the two pieces of OSB, trim down some of the adjacent OSB, chisel it out, cut down the supports. Areas that I couldn't reach with the circ saw, I used a recip saw, just trimmed it out. I'd purchased 6 of these 16 by 16 blocks just to make sure that they were going to fit. Didn't want to buy a bunch that weren't going to fit. Sat there and played around with it for a little bit. I decided I was going to have to rip this one piece down when I cut it out. Cleaned it all up. Made sure that I was going to be able to have nine blocks fit in there. Went ahead and went back to the big box store and got 3 additional. Now it's just a matter of playing Tetris, rearranging the blocks to get a pattern, figure out how I want it. My oldest son said this scene reminded him of that scene out of the Labyrinth where the trolls would pop up and rearrange the blocks as the gal wrote her directions on. Once I found the pattern I wanted, I went ahead and removed the blocks, put a little blocking under there as a dam. Went ahead and mixed up some mortar, started setting these. I got them set to where they're just at the level of the wood floor. I'd never done any masonry work before. Only time I'd ever used these landscape type blocks was in landscape on dirt. It was rather simple, just put some mortar in, lay the blocks level as you go. Ones in the back gave me a little bit of a problem, but I ended up just using a rubber mallet, make them fit. Everything worked out. I did start putting the mortar in between the seams. Came back later, cleaned that up, just cleaning out the grooves. Where I messed up was I didn't final wash that down. Ended up having to come back the next day and use my grinder with a wire wheel on it. Made quite a mess. Well, next weekend I decided I was going to start tackling on the metal siding. Had a lot of screws to take out. Went ahead and marked out where the edges were, measured up the approximate height of what I wanted, where I was going to build this block wall that I was putting in using pavers again. A lot of screws in this. Once I got the two metal panels down, set those to the side and began framing in an area to hold a backer board. Got my handy dandy pocket hole jig out, just cut pieces in between to screw into the purlins. Right at this area, that's about the center post of the entire building. So they'd wrap the insulation around. It was kind of difficult to push them in there without cutting the insulation back. Wrap the insulation back around the pole. I don't think it's going to matter. I was kind of concerned putting this in about the combustibility issue, so I decided to frame this in, put a concrete backer board. Everything I read on about putting the wood stoves in, you wanted to stay away from combustibles. I figured, well, the paper face on the fiberglass is combustible. Next, I had to remove a portion of this bottom piece of steel that the panels sit on. Went in, took 10 snips, cut it, measured the height where I was going to put the top piece to hold the concrete board in there. Just 2x6, giving me plenty of room to slop. I know it doesn't look level. Went ahead and leveled, came back, decided I'd better level it up. Didn't look right. Now it's level. Next, I got this concrete backer board. Cut it to the width. It was a 3x5 piece. Cuts pretty much like sheetrock does. Just marked it out. Took a utility knife and just scored it. Lifted it up, bent it. Just cut the 1 foot piece off the utility knife. Put a little piece 2x4 under to pull it up. Screwed it down. Incidentally, this backer board I went with was the only one I could find at the big box store that had a UL fire flame spread and fire resistance rating on it. Nothing else seemed to have. Figured that would be added benefit. Now, went back to the big box store, got these brick pavers, and my intention was to lay these out. And when I laid them out, it was approximately 3/4 of an inch of a full brick shy that I need to cut off. Got me a masonry chisel. Every time I tried to cut 3/4 of an inch off of it, the bricks seemed to split right in the middle. Kept trying this, and eventually I figured, well, they're going to break in the middle so easily, I might as well just adjust the wall and go with half bricks on the edge rather than trying to trim off a little piece. Pulled what I had down, figured out what I needed, set it up, see how it was going to fit. Went back, took 10 snips, cut 3/4 of an inch off of the piece of steel, lined it all up again, make sure I was getting this correct. I'll go ahead and just lay out a few rows, just make sure it's going to look right. Take them back off. Now that I'm happy with that, went and mixed up some mortar and started mortaring. Again, I'll say I've never done masonry work, and I know that this is not the correct orientation for bricks, but this is a faux wall. It's more aesthetic. It's not structural by any means. It wasn't intended to be structural. It's just a heat block. Keep the heat from the combustibles. It was rather simple. Just check each block for level, throw some more mortar down, butter it up. Got easier as I went. You learn as you go. Kind of rough on my back, working that low to the ground. About that time, Mrs. Wilson comes in. Make sure I'm doing it right. Get better level. Just this first row you want to get nice and level. Then it was just a matter of buttering them up, putting some mortar down, laying them, checking for level. Just keep going. Some of my mortar was too wet. Have to keep adding mortar mix. It's getting this down. Mrs. Wilson wanted to get in the act. Didn't get the footage. I was awful tired by the time this was done. She went ahead and laid the next row. Following weekend, I had nieces and nephews up. They were all going to the neighborhood pumpkin patch. They stopped in to see how I was progressing. Finally got smart, laid down a piece of 1/4 inch plywood on the floor to catch the drippings from the mortar, so I didn't have quite the mess to clean up. I was putting in wall ties, hold the blocks in place. About every 4th row I put a wall tie in. Everybody wanted to get into the act, see what I was doing. Just add more wall ties. Mike was giving me all the advice I needed. I think I started boring him. Well, they all decided they were gonna run off to the pumpkin patch and leave me to doing what I was doing. So it was basically the same thing. Mixed up some mortar, had the bricks lined up where I wanted them to go. Set that first row down, apply mortar, and check for level, and just went to town, just laying up each of the bricks, row by row. Trim the half blocks. They split pretty easy, and just had a little bit to trim off of them. Video makes it look like it went rather quickly, but it takes quite a bit of time. It's a couple hours to do this. Again, like I say, I've never done masonry work before. But I think now that I've done this, I might be able to do some more if I ever needed to. Get this next row up, and I'll add some more of the wall ties. Get all the wall ties in. Add some more mortar, bricks. Just keep going to town. Got a little chintzy with some of it. Started running short, running dry. Kept checking for level and making sure the ends were good, but kind of not really plumb. Those wall ties kind of pushed out some of the areas. Final row, final brick to break down. Just butter them up, set them, check for level. Like I said, getting a little chintzy there. Finally mixed up one more bucket of mortar. Set it on there. Set the final blocks. Finally, last half block to go. Once I got that into place, still have a half bucket of mortar. I just decided to just throw it behind the blocks, fill in some of the gap. Again, took my handy dandy pointer tool, which is actually a popsicle stick, cleaned out all the mortar. This time I got smart, decided to wash it off with wet towel and water.